Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining me tonight in the Locker Room for the 14th episode in the Conversation with Alan series. I'm Alan Locher. There's a quote in the Talmud that I love: "He who saves a life saves the world." This quote hits home for me personally, as my life story is one that could have turned out quite differently if not for the very brave men and women who risked their lives and the lives of their families to save my mother and father during World War II. I created Conversations with Alan to have open and honest discussions about the rise of hate and about the rise of anti-Semitism, with high hopes that it leads to conversations that make us all think about our own place in history and what we can do together to change our country's course to stop hate in all its forms. Tonight, producer and director Tyler Gildin is here to discuss his award-winning documentary, The Starfish, a very personal and untold story about his grandfather, Herb. The Starfish is a story of a man's struggle to not only succeed, but to accept himself and his circumstances during one of the most infamous periods of history, where it took sacrifice, courage, and at times the open hearts of others to survive. Herb's tenacity, dedication, and determination to become something in the face of so many obstacles is what makes his ultimate legacy a testament to the American dream. His family would not have been able to escape Germany and ultimately reconnect in the United States had it not been for the efforts of the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. HIAS remains dedicated to providing welcome, safety, and freedom to refugees of all faiths and ethnicities from all over the world, and especially today with everything that's going on in the Ukraine. The Starfish is a reminder of the importance of generosity and what a motto I believe we all should live by: he who saves a life saves the world. Tyler directed the documentary. It is my pleasure to welcome to the Locker Room Tyler Gildin. Thanks so much for being here, Tyler.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I was really so moved by the documentary and learned quite a bit, in the process about Jews living in Germany and the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which I didn't know much about myself.
Yeah, the HIAS is a tremendous organization who I've been fortunate enough to do several panels and conversations with since doing the film, and I'm always promoting what they do. And given as you mentioned, what's going on right now in Ukraine, you see that HIAS is still a very active organization today, which is a incredible testament to their longevity, considering they helped my family, all those years ago in World War II, ultimately come to the U.S. and now they're still helping people seek refuge. So that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you and I were talking backstage about guests. I would love to talk to them. I think that organization is incredible, and the fact that they still even have to be, like you said, in business today, over 70 years later, is incredible. Before we talk about your grandfather and the Starfish, I'm curious, what inspired you to become a filmmaker?
I think I've always just been really interested in storytelling in different formats, whether for, a period I was doing and still do a bit of stand-up comedy, to just writing and directing, and really just always wanting to find different outlets and creative ways to express myself and tell stories. So yeah, I don't think I necessarily ever said I want to be a documentary filmmaker or anything really specific. I never kind of had a direct lane, and I still don't, to be honest. I kind of do a lot of different creative endeavors across the board. So yeah, I think it's just something that I've always liked to put on shows or make little movies with, my original camera I had. So yeah, it's always been in that realm for me.
What was the original camera?
It was, the first camera, I'm trying to remember like the first, but I had, the bulky VHS-C cameras with the tapes that you would put in, the small little tapes that if you wanted to then play in a VCR, you had to put in another tape to put in. I'm not like incredibly old. I'm only 32. So there's older iterations of that. But yeah, it's a lot easier
I'm
today.
that generation. I'm that older generation. What was the first thing you directed?
First thing I directed, That I mean, does playing with
Yeah.
wrestling action figures in your bedroom does that count? Because I think maybe taking to the Rock and Stone Cold on my little Titantron WWF whatever might have been it. But yeah, I mean, I've always, like I said, I've always been
Yeah.
interested in telling different types of stories and fun things. And really, obviously, as I got older and matured beyond wrestling figurines, was looking for other subject matters that I could possibly capture.
Well, and this certainly is one you captured well. I know that your grandfather didn't speak much about his World War II story until much, much later in life. What did you know or understand about, his early life while you were growing up as a young man?
Honestly, I really didn't know anything. I mean, I always knew that that he grew up in Germany and that he lived in Sweden at some point, but that was really it. And it's so strange now, knowing what I know, to think that, like, why wasn't I always asking more? Like, why did I just take that at surface level of like, oh, okay, move on? But, I guess my grandfather was always somebody who was never interested in talking about himself. He was not an anecdotal person. He was never like, oh, let me sit down and tell you about my life. It was really, he was always interested in you, and that you, as me being his grandchild, or if he met you for the first time, he just, whoever it was, he always wanted to talk about you and, would give you advice and impart wisdom on you. And he was a great listener, but he wasn't necessarily a huge talker in terms of talking about himself. And so for whatever reason, it just really was never anything that came up. And obviously now I think, like, why didn't I ask more questions? Why didn't I want to know more when I was younger? And, I guess at the end of the day, it just wasn't something that we spoke about.
Yeah. I think, I've come to learn, like, through this show and having these conversations, we all have to ask more early, before, you're lucky you were able to get the story, but it, it it's just a great lesson. We all should, just our own history, whether it's a story like this or just something else. I think if we don't ask those questions, we'll never know, you
Right.
know.
Yeah. And just to, find things to tell your kids, and, to keep your family's legacy and, intact, I think is important for anybody. I've had so many people come up to me after watching the film or hearing about it, be like, oh my God, it's a great idea. How do I do something like this? And I kind of just always point to them like, well, you always have one of these. This technically has a really solid camera and recording device on it. And you could just sit down with your grandparents and film them that way. You don't have to do a full documentary. You don't have to hire a crew, tell a host. You don't have to do that. You could just, as simple as, hey, grandma, grandpa, mom, or dad, I just want to record this so I have it. And, we have more access than ever to this type of information and the means to record it. So, yeah, I think it's, people, if they want to make the effort and initiative, they can fairly simply do it.
In February 2017, you lost your great aunt Celie, and I think it was at that funeral that you heard your grandfather give a eulogy and talk about their story like you had never heard before. Can you take us back to hearing it for the first time?
Yeah, so it was when Seal had passed away and we were at the funeral. Yeah, my grandfather was giving a eulogy, and he just totally opened up a part of him that I had never heard about, and was talking about what it was like being a child, 10 years old, with his sisters 12 and 14, and saying goodbye to their parents and going to live with strangers in Sweden. And he just spoke so much about his sister Seal, who was the oldest, and how she became a second mother to him. And it was just, I almost, part of me was almost upset that I didn't even know about this sooner, because I would have had so much more respect for my aunt Seal. I mean, not that I didn't, but it was just so much that, like, I would have loved to have known that while she was alive, how important she was to my grandfather and to our family. And I never knew it, because it was not something ever discussed. So, nothing like a funeral makes you think about the importance of life and one's life story. And, leaving that funeral and really knowing, my grandfather wasn't getting any younger. I, said in the car ride, I think I turned to one of my siblings, my cousins, and I was just like, I need to sit grandpa down and record him telling the story. And I didn't necessarily say, oh, I'm going to do a documentary or anything. It was more of just like, hey, let's get my I could probably do better than a phone, because I work in industry, so I could get a camera. But either way, like, let me just sit him down and record this because I wished I had a camera out, during the eulogy because it was so beautiful and it was so moving. And that was really like the impetus for all of it. And that was in February. And I believe I began filming with my grandfather, that May.
And like you said, he wasn't forthright about sharing these stories. Why did you learn, that was after, the funeral?
I mean, I think the only reason my grandfather spoke about it was because it was a funeral and he was giving a eulogy and he wanted to really tell, those people there exactly who his sister was and, what she meant to him. And I think that was like, I think he made an exception. I don't think in any other situation he would have, publicly spoke to people necessarily about, his story and his childhood, but I think he was feeling very reflective in the fact that he had lost his sister. He'd lost his other sister, years earlier. So now he was the last remaining of his, immediate five. And I think that it just opened up a chord to him. And then when I kind of approached him, I don't know how soon after I approached him about wanting to do it, he was very open to it. There really wasn't much hesitation. I think he was maybe ready for it, or I also think my grandfather was a tremendous believer in me and supporter of me. So I think he also felt like, if this was something that his grandson was interested in and was a pursuit that his grandson had, he was going to support it, just like any other pursuit he would have potentially supported.
How did you begin to put the pieces together to tell the story of the Starfish?
So, I mean, yeah, as I said, it really just started with, one day going to his house and interviewing him and my grandma and them together. And that was really just like, I didn't know what I was going to leave there with, if I was going to do more or less. And really, because he just unlocked so many things in that conversation, in that interview, I said, okay, maybe I really should speak to others. And that's when I spoke to my cousin Robin, who's Seal's daughter. And I spoke to my cousin Rhonda, who's Margaret's daughter. I kind of felt like I needed to tell a story of these three children. And because his sisters weren't around, I should go to, the next closest thing, which was, their children. And then I felt like I should speak a little bit to my aunt, who could speak to what it was like growing up with my grandfather, or my father to speak to. And then it kind of just kept spinballing from there. Every time I'd speak to one person, I'd learn something new, or something that, corroborated with something else. And you kind of keep putting the story together from there. And, the biggest thing from the Starfish, the title of the film itself was really when I got all of the footage from my grandfather had gone back in 2001. He went back and reconnected with his Swedish family, who he had not seen in 60 years. This was a really special event that my aunt was really the big orchestrator of in the summer of 2001. And I was not there because I was at summer camp, which again is another thing I think of now. Like, what was I thinking? How was I not there? But, when you're a 10-year-old boy, and if my parents said, hey, Tyler, do you want to go to Europe and meet grandpa's old family, or do you want to go to summer camp with your best friends? And so I probably would have said, I want to go to summer camp. So I can't really fault my parents too much. And who knows, maybe if I went on that, maybe I wouldn't have been as interested these years later to tell the story. Who knows?
And you say it was your aunt who helped put that trip together. That's Seeley's daughter.
No, so that's my grandfather. That's my dad's sister. That's my grandfather's daughter. She was the one who really has, I believe, throughout her whole life been very interested in her father, my grandfather's story, and was the one who basically was able to, I think, through a private investigator, was able to track down the family in Sweden, and ultimately kind of facilitated this reconnection. So It was a really special thing for my family to go. Of course, as the 10-year-old boy I was, I guess it wasn't that of importance to me, but to my family, it was really special. And having watched that footage and then seeing that my grandfather, they had this big, I guess, welcome or thank you dinner where they my whole family who was there, and Agneta and Mivi, who were his Swedish sisters, and their entire family and extended family was there. And my grandfather told the story that he had read in a newspaper recently. I believe it was something he found in the New York Times, and it was the Starfish story. And he kind of told that story. And what's so ironic about that is that that's the same story that every summer at camp during our Friday night service, our camp director tells that story too of the Starfish story. And so I watched that and I was like, oh my, I wasn't there, but for all I know, at that same moment, I was hearing that same story. And I had no idea that this story had such significance to my grandfather. That's a story that has such significance to me and my siblings because it's a summer camp story we tell. So as soon as I watched that clip, I was like, okay, I'm bookending the film with this story and I'm calling it The Starfish. And that was, pretty early on. Like I didn't even have the whole documentary really done, but I was like, I know how it starts and how it ends, and I know the title, and then the rest of it, I got to keep doing interviews.
Yeah, there's an immediate connection right there to the whole family. When I just hear you talk about, first of all, I didn't realize that your grandfather's daughter hired a private investigator because amazing that you were able to find them and reconnect. But it really reminds me of my own family and my mom. I always knew about the family that helped save her, but we went as a family in 1996 to their house, and when we arrived, it was sort of like you just described. There were so many people there to see my mom. She was basically their sibling, their daughter, all of that. But I just got those same feelings. It's quite incredible, that connection that is made at such a horrible time in someone's life, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's the selflessness of the individuals for all the bad that there is out there. There's those who want to do good, and they didn't just and part of the Starfish in that idea of you can't save the whole world, but to that one starfish, to that one life, you made a difference. And my grandfather and his sisters in that sense were the starfish who they made a difference. And it's also the ripple effect I like to think about with the Starfish of think about how many people and generations now have been impacted just because of the CeeLo family and what they did. And at the time, did they know the heroics that they were doing? Maybe not. I mean, I guess either way, they kind of looked at it as there's a family in need, and they were adopting my grandfather and the other families who adopted his sisters. And yeah, I mean, I'm forever grateful and in existence because of them.
I mean, you and I would not be having this conversation. It's as clear as that. Did you have to do any type of research yourself, to prepare to tell the story?
I mean, yeah, I definitely, I spoke a lot with HIAS. I mean, I kind of wanted to put some pieces together because, also part of the story is also I'm getting the narrative of my grandfather who at the time of this was, 10 to 12 years old. So you got to understand that some things are going to be romanticized or whatnot just because he was really a young boy during the time. So I think it was important for me to also talk to HIAS and to talk to, my cousins who had spoken to their mothers who were a little bit older than my grandfather at the time to get some context as well, though they were all children, though my, Aunt Seal had to grow up very fast as she was the pseudo mother as they were traveling. But kind of to put the whole pieces together and to look at, the passports and to really try and figure out exactly what the route was and the dates were. Fortunately, I had a lot of documents and photos that had been saved over the years. I think when they went back in 2001, a lot of research that they did then and, pictures that they got then were at my disposal now. So I had a big leg up than starting from ground one. I really had a lot of the assets there. It was just, what's the way I want to put this together, in a story. And then, I thought it was important to also get Zacharias, who was, who is Agnetta's son, who basically my grandfather's Swedish sister's son, to talk to him as well. I thought it was important to get his perspective because, I thought it was important to also hear from the Swedish family and the impact it had on them.
Fantastic. Can you take us back and tell us what happened to her and his family when he was 10 living in Germany?
Yeah, sure. So I guess when he was 10 and his sisters were 12 and 14 living in Germany, they realized I think my understanding is Kristallnacht was the night that really kind of made my great grandfather Abraham realize that it's time for them to get out. I think he was one of those who was very, he loved Germany. He loved his life. He loved his community and didn't think that anything was going to ever really, really happen. I think after that, it was kind of like, okay, we need to make moves. And my understanding is HIAS played a tremendous role in that. And I think, there was other organizations and networks that a lot of different, Jews at the time were using and trying to figure out their next move. And essentially, from my understanding, talking to HIAS, they, at the time, their priority was to get children out of these types of situations because they felt like they're going to get the most sympathy from children. They could find people in other countries who would adopt children, opposed to adopting an adult. You can actually adopt a child. And they felt like that would be the first thing that they could do. And it really is such a gut-wrenching, unfair decision to think about that my great-grandparents had to do. And this idea that, to give up essentially your children for the hope that they may find, a better life and to get out and not knowing if you'll ever see each other again. And I can't imagine that, now being a father of two young kids, I can't imagine bringing them to a train and hugging and kissing them goodbye and saying, it'll be okay. Like, I can't even imagine what that exchange was. And I watch and see things now, like in Ukraine or in any other places. And this idea of any parent having to say goodbye to a child is just, it's gut wrenching. It's terrible. And so essentially HIAS was able to find 3 Swedish families who lived in a small ski town in Falun, Sweden, who were willing to each take one of the children. And they went on a train, said goodbye to their parents, and ultimately went to live in Sweden. There is a very happy ending for them in the sense that eventually my great-grandparents were also through HIAS able to get out. And then eventually all of them were able to reconnect, 2 years later in the US. But that's a rarity. You have to imagine at the time, my great-grandparents were saying goodbye. We hope we will see you. We'll do everything we can to see you. And I think, I think the Swedish families were also saying, we're adopting these kids for life. I think that the chance of it all working out had to have been fairly slim, but, fortunately, it did. So, and they were all able to eventually reconnect and start all over again in America.
Absolutely. I mean, not only, the parents saying goodbye, but the kids saying goodbye, not knowing if they'll ever see their parents again at that young age is that can't imagine it on either side. And
Sure.
and to point out a statistics you show at the end of the film, let's remind everybody 1.5 million children were killed by the Nazis during the war. So the fact that all 3 of them got out alive is incredible, and the fact that they were reunited. I mean, this organization truly, I think, I think about it all the time. I mean, if not, and these families who risked, so many lives to save other people is just amazing. What did you, talking to the son, what was it like for you? Seeing that reunion video, speaking to the family yourself, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm forever thankful. I mean, Zacharias played a huge role actually in helping me with the film because he had to translate all the Swedish documents and things that I had. He translated them for me, and he was able to, a lot of pictures I had that I didn't know who was who. He was able to tell me who people were, and it really helped me identify some dates and things. So he was very helpful. But yeah, I mean, it's incredible. His daughter watched the film, who's of my age, I guess the 3rd generation, and she reached out to me, and she lives in London, and it's just amazing that it really helps expand the world and the network of people who were directly implicated and exist because of things that had happened. And it makes me definitely want to establish more of a relationship with her and keep that Gildin family and CeeLo family connection for generations to come, because it's a beautiful story. It really is. That you wouldn't think that I live in Long Island, and a family in Sweden, 50, 60, 70 years ago is the reason I'm here today. You just wouldn't realize that the connection. And there's so many of us who are really connected and have deeper roots and have, incredible stories. So, I'm happy I told my grandfather's story, and I'm sure there's other stories that I may tell, or I'd love for other, filmmakers or storytellers to tell, because they're all important. And while it's history, unfortunately, history does repeat itself. And these stories are as relevant, in my opinion, to today as ever.
Mm-hmm. More so. I told you about going back to Holland in 1996 to meet this family. I definitely encourage you to maintain those relationships. Here we are 30 something years later from 96. My sister and I, the children, grandchildren have come to stay with us. We have established, they are, a part of our family, and it's, for me, 77 years after the war, they have connected so many families because of, the one act that they did by saving, my mother and my grandmother's life. So I encourage those relationships. I think it's, like you said, it's truly amazing. You got to work on this with your grandfather, for the last 2 years of his life. That must have been an amazing experience.
Yeah. I mean, if you had to sign up and say, "Hey, how do you want to spend the last 2 years of your role model, someone you really care about's life?" I definitely signed up for the way that I'd want to do it. So that was really special. Yeah, he was very supportive throughout the entire process, and yeah, it was really special that he got to see it, and that he really, I could tell he appreciated it. Sometimes he felt like a bit of a movie star, which was kind of funny because it's like so not my grandfather's personality. But I think he got a kick out of it. I mean, at first, he always would say to me like, "Is anybody going to care? Why would anyone care about the story?" And I think that's one of the biggest challenges with something like this, is that what's the story that I think most people will want to hear and connect with and empathize with and can relate to. Because at the end of the day, it's my grandfather. So I could find it all fascinating. I could have done a, 7-part, docu-series and it'd been phenomenal, because it's my grandfather. It's my story. I care. But that was the biggest challenge in making the film. It's like, okay, well, what's a story that someone who doesn't know my grandfather is still going to care about, is still going to connect with? Maybe someone who's not even Jewish can still watch and still care about. So I think that was the biggest challenge was, and my grandfather kept reminding me of like, "You sure anyone who's not, our family going to care?" And I had to keep assuring him like, "Grandpa, yes, this is, not just our family story. It's a human interest story. It speaks to so many larger parts of humanity than just our family." So I think it took a little while to convince him of that, but maybe that's just, kind of the humble guy that he was.
Absolutely. And what he was able to live through and become as successful as he did is an incredible story to come out of such, a dark time. God knows, 70 years from now, what's going to come out of the Ukraine. It's, yeah, I mean, being able to preserve this legacy through film, talk about the importance of that, and what that journey has been like, just watching it unfold and the reaction to it for yourself.
Yeah, no, it's sorry. It's no, it's really special. It's something that I know my siblings and cousins feel the same way. It's something that we are so excited that one day our kids can watch. My son, my kids are 3 and 2, so they, probably wait till their bar mitzvahs, to show them something like this. But yeah, I mean, it's such an incredible thing to know. People have pictures of their grandparents that they could show their kids, or small videos, but I have a legitimate, documentary that I could show them of, and it's not just of who your grandfather was, it's also where you came from. It's who you are. So I think that's just something that's really, yeah, it's really special to have that and to be able to share that. So yeah, I'm excited for, who knows, in 10 years when my kids watch it, they might be watching it on, eyeglasses, or they'll be watching it through contact lenses. I don't know what the future of
Yeah,
technology is going to look like, in which how they're going to watch it. But the idea that they can watch it, maybe it'll be in chips that will be implanted into their brains. I don't know, but it's nice to know that my kids and their kids, and there's no reason why generations to come can't watch this.
absolutely. And you said you spoke. Did you speak to the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society while you were making the film, or that came later?
Yeah, no, I spoke to them throughout the process. I spoke with them. They were, pretty early on, because I also got a lot of documents from them as well, some photos and documents, and then just things that I need to understand. Like, so how exactly did this work, and what would have been the way you would have gone about it. So, yeah, my grandfather had been, since I think since I don't know if since they reconnected in 2001 or for years, but had been always a big, donor to HIAS, and was always very thankful. And actually, when he passed, that's how we asked people, instead of sending gifts or whatnot, to in his name, to give a donation to them.
That spectacular. The organization has helped 250,000 men, women, and children escape to new havens, which is incredible. And they continue to be dedicated to providing welcome safety to refugees of all faiths and ethnicities from all over the world. And you do know, right? They are helping the current refugees coming out of the Ukraine war right now.
I mean, they're helping, they help all refugees, like you said, of all kinds, nationalities, places. I mean, from my conversations with them, they say, they used to help people because the people were Jewish, but now they help people because they are Jewish. Because right now, it's not really Jews who are the refugees anymore. It's other individuals of other ethnicities, and to them, the mission is still the same. They're not helping people who are Jewish. Now they're helping people because them as an organization, as Jews, feel the need to also, help and contribute, and to make sure that these things that happen to the Jewish people don't happen to other people. So yeah, they really are an incredible organization.
I will absolutely reach out to them.
I'll make an introduction. I'm happy.
I would love that. I would love to be involved. I think that is an incredible, organization. Tell me about your grandfather's life after the war, and the incredible business he created for himself, the family, and I think for the people who worked for him.
Yeah. So I mean, I think my grandfather always had, I guess, somewhat of a chip on his shoulder of just wanted to do something for himself, and I think create something that was he was a very business driven, is my understanding, and it really him and his brother-in-law, Lou, they were initially in the grocery business, and I think the grocery business wasn't was not a business that my grandfather took pride in, and he didn't really, he wanted to do something else that he felt was his, and they ultimately founded a lighting company that still exists today, Sacco Products. And yeah, I mean, I think built something from really the ground up that is something to be really proud of. And I think he was very, very business driven, that it took him till years later in his life to kind of look back at also some of his family and the things that had got him to that point, with the Swedish family. And I think he was so focused on himself and his life here that he was not focusing on nostalgic in the past. And in later years, finally, accepting that, and going back to Sweden, and sitting down with me and telling this documentary, were things that I think it took him years of his life to really be able to go back and compartmentalize it and speak about. But I think otherwise, I'm sure it played some role in his drive for success. And, he says throughout the documentary, his fear of failure was really what motivated him. He knew what it was like to be poor, and to feel like he was at the bottom. And, he wanted to build something that he could be proud of. And he certainly did it.
Just hearing the word fear, I mean, none of us can understand the fear that the whole family felt at that time, and hope most people don't ever have to feel that. What are some of the biggest lessons you feel you learned from him, and by working on putting this story together?
I think you kind of touched on it right there. I think it's kind of perspective, that things that maybe I complain about, or things that I'm going through, they're really nothing in comparison to what he had to go through. I mean, he did more from the ages of 10 to 12 than maybe I've done from 0 to 32. So he, I think it's putting things in perspective of what he was up against. and just also just the respect for, his parents, the terrible decisions that they had to make. When I first started the film, I wasn't a parent, and over the last few years, I've become a parent, and I think that's even shifted some of my ability to even empathize further with parts of the story that I did that didn't hit me as hard then that hit me now. Being on the other side and being a parent. So I think having that perspective, but also just that idea of human kindness and generosity kind of tropes all, and that there are those people out there, and that I'd like to think, put in a similar situation, that I would do what the CeeLo family did. But who do I know that for sure? I don't know. I'm fortunate to not be in that situation right now, but if I was, I'd like to think that I would also want to do that right thing and make that sacrifice and step up for somebody else. So I think it's the idea of human kindness and perspective, and the idea of the Starfish story itself is if you can make the difference to one person, you made a world's difference to that person. And you can't save everybody, you can't help everybody, you can't fix every problem, but if you can do something really important and life altering for one person, you ultimately that ripple effect is so much larger than you or I could ever know.
Absolutely. And it's something, my sister and I talk about too. We hope we would do the same thing, but until you're put in that position, you really don't know.
Totally.
What was it like to attend the Miami premiere with your grandfather?
I mean, it was awesome. I mean, it was great. That was definitely his peak, movie star, fandom, I guess. It was great. It was, we had a packed theater, a lot of friends and family were there, a lot of, also just, moviegoers too. But it was really special. He spoke afterwards, which I think was really impactful to hear from him as well, besides his, obviously throughout the documentary, to hear him also and his reaction. So that was just that was really special. Unfortunately he passed away a few months later, but it was just the fact that he got to see it was really special. And after he passed, I definitely had to think a little bit, because the film had been completed with him being alive, because he was alive when I finished the film and we first premiered it. But then, after he passed, I kind of thought about, do I keep the film as it is, or do I update it? And I kind of felt like I wanted to update it. I wanted to be the full, bookend on his life. I thought that was, important to put that at the end. I added in the one, I'm very fortunate that we brought my son when he was 4 months to Florida to meet my grandpa. Ended up being about 2 months before he passed, maybe like 6 weeks before he passed, actually. But, I have that one video clip, so we put that at the end. I just felt like I needed that closure. Maybe it was something just for me. I could have just left it as he's alive forever, but I think maybe I needed that to be able to just kind of put that bookend on it. So I thought that was important. And that was really hard. It was really hard to come up with the language that I wanted to put at the end. And, I did a lot of rounds of that, but I think it was the right decision ultimately, because, when people watch it, they should know that, he lived a great life, and, he passed, but he got to see the film. He got to meet his first great grandchild, and, it's happy. It's sad that, he passed, but it's also, he lived a good, happy life.
Yeah, it's the full picture, and the film has screened at so many festivals and won the Audience Award for Short Film Documentary. Must have felt really good.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I always appreciate any opportunity to share the film, and to have people watch it, or ask questions. And it's definitely a special thing. And kind of speaking to that point of updating the ending of the film, I think the first place was the San Francisco Jewish Film Festival, was the first screening, I believe, after he had passed. And to be in the room when we got to that final end card, and to hear people were genuinely, it was like almost like he had passed again. It was this strange, I can't really describe it, but you heard the visceral people oh, and it was it was just validation to me that he had made an impact in that 42 minutes, that people felt like they had lost somebody that they that meant something to them, when they had 43 minutes earlier had no idea who he was. So I think that was good validation that I guess the film did its job in my grandfather making it an impact.
Absolutely. Well, I am so glad, I think you asked how I came upon the Starfish, and it was, a friend of mine who saw one of the posts on LinkedIn about the film, and I've watched it and I loved it, and I hope everyone here watching tonight will go check out the Starfish. But Tyler, before we leave tonight, I was hoping you would read the short story for us.
Sure. Yeah. No. So this is the it's adapted from the Starfish Thrower by Lorraine Isley, and it's one day a man was walking along the beach when he noticed a figure in the distance. As he got closer, he realized the figure was that of a boy picking something up, gently throwing it into the ocean. Approaching the boy, he asked, "What are you doing?" The youth replied, "Throwing starfish back into the ocean. The sun is up. The tide is going out. If I don't throw them back, they'll die." "Son," the man said, "don't you realize there are miles and miles of beach and hundreds of starfish? You can't possibly make a difference." After listening politely, the boy bent down, picked up another starfish, and threw it into the surf. Then, smiling at the man, he said, "I made a difference for that one." So I think that's a very good indicator of what the CeeLo family did for my grandfather, and his sisters and my family. So yeah, I think it's a great story, a lot of great messages from it, and I wanted to make it a part of the film.
Tyler, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to meet you. You did a brilliant job, showcasing how, that there is good in the world, and one little act can make a huge impact that is right. You're proof of that right here. So
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to share the film, and I hope people continue to watch it and engage with it. And this was a lot of fun. So I appreciate you having me on. I'm sorry if I sound very sick because I have a bit of a cold, and starfish. Some people pass on starfishes, and my son passed on his sickness. So that's what I've been blessed with today. So I apologize.
Well, no worries. You feel better, and really, I appreciate you spending the time.
All right. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Have a great night. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you to Tyler Gildin for sharing the Starfish and the story of his grandfather Herb with us. If you haven't seen the film, please watch the Starfish. It's available to watch on Apple TV, Prime Video, Google Play, Vimeo, and Vudu. Also, please remember, he who saves a life saves the world. As I leave you tonight, remember that we all have choices to make in life. Speak up, do the hard thing, and let's make sure we stop hate in all its forms. I truly believe conversations like this can change the world around us. Until our next conversation, good night.